A good GPS navigation system can get you out of a jam when you need directions. However, enter the wrong coordinates and it could get you in trouble. This is what happened in 2023 to a 60-year-old California man. He was driving close to Canada, but never intended to enter the country. But somehow he managed to put in the wrong coordinates and wound up at the Canadian border. Because of this error, he ended up waiting in line at the Rainbow Bridge border crossing in Niagara Falls. Imagine the look on his face when he was unable to turn around. Since this wasn't a planned trip to Canada, that meant he didn't have a passport. And since he had no passport, both he and his vehicle were subject to an additional search. For the average driver making such a mistake, this would be nothing more than a minor inconvenience. But this was no average driver. During what is known as a secondary examination, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police officials found around 400 pounds of cannabis in the vehicle. That doesn't sound like he was driving to a friend's house for a casual smoke. And if that wasn't bad enough, they also found more than $602,000 American dollars. The money and drugs were located throughout the vehicle. They found the cannabis in vacuum-packed containers. The cash was separated into bundles and concealed in a safe, suitcase and lockable case. Clearly, this man was on a mission. Police said in a statement, "This style of packaging is consistent with those commonly used by drug dealers or money launderers." The suspect was then promptly arrested. He was charged with suspicion of the possession and import of cannabis and possession of more than $5,000, knowing that all or parts of the proceeds were obtained by a crime. A superintendent from the Canadian Division of Border Integrity had this to say about the arrest. The Canada Border Services Agency and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police continue to get positive results from our collaboration to protect Canada's borders. This seizure of cash and contraband is one more example of how our combined services are keeping Ontario citizens safe from criminal activities. While that's certainly a true statement, it's a bit ironic since the suspect only crossed the border by accident. He never intended to deliver cash and contraband across the border. So on behalf of the United States, we want to add the following line to the above statement. It's also an example of how our services are keeping American citizens safe from criminal activities as well. As you can see in a few of our other videos, people can get pretty upset over a food order. Sometimes they even wind up calling 911 to complain, which is against the law. But there are also other occasions where an angry customer decides to bypass police and take matters into their own hands. This is what happened in 2023 at a Chipotle restaurant in Parma, Ohio. A 39-year-old woman was not happy with the way her food was prepared. She ordered a Chipotle burrito bowl but didn't like how it looked. Apparently, it wasn't as neatly prepared as these. Normally, when this happens, there are two options. You can ask them to make you another one, or you can request a refund. Of course, if you haven't paid, you can simply refuse the item and leave. But according to some customers, there is also another option. You can throw the food back at the employee. And that's exactly what this woman did. According to witnesses, she was visibly upset with her food. After yelling at an employee, she took her order and left the restaurant. She returned just a few minutes later with her Chipotle bowl and slammed it down on the counter. After expressing her dissatisfaction again, she initially appears to walk away. But in a split second, she throws the burrito bowl in the employee's face and leaves. Witnesses ran out to write down the woman's license plate number and gave it to the police. According to reports, they also prevented her from leaving until officers arrived and arrested her. While the woman apologized to the victim in court, she still pleaded her case that she was unhappy with her order. She said, "If I showed you how my food looked and how my food looked a week later from that same restaurant, it's disgusting looking." However, a Parma Municipal Court judge informed her that the only thing disgusting was her behavior. He told her, "You didn't get your burrito bowl the way you like it. And this is how you respond? This is not Real Housewives of Parma. This behavior is not acceptable." She was found guilty of one count of assault and sentenced to 180 days in jail with 90 days suspended. However, he also gave her an option. She can shorten her sentence by 60 days if she agrees to get a job at a fast food restaurant, working at least 20 hours a week. In other words, the judge wanted her to see what it was like to walk in the shoes of a fast food worker. But would she take the offer?
Do you want to walk in her shoes for 2 months and learn how people should treat people, or do you want to do your jail time?
I'd like to walk in her shoes.
Sounds like a yes. The judge explained his decision this way. Why should the city taxpayers pay for her and feed her for 90 days in jail? He also wanted to teach her a sense of empathy. The Chipotle employee told the judge she ended up getting another job after the incident because she was traumatized. However, she felt the sentence was fair. The judge ended the case with this comment to the guilty woman. I bet you won't be happy with the food you are going to get in the jail. He's right. And if she doesn't like how they prepare her food, she better not throw it back. In 2012, a teenage boy in Florida met a cute girl at his high school. They began talking and later texting each other. Over the weeks, they started sharing stories about their lives. Soon the casual talk turned into flirting. Not long after, this 18-year-old honor student was starting to feel a real love connection with his new girl. One day, she asked him if he smoked pot and he said no. She then started asking him if he could get some pot for her. At first he appeared reluctant, but every few days she would send a text asking him if he had any marijuana. Eventually, he gave in and obtained a small amount of pot for his new girlfriend. She then tried to pay him $25 for the marijuana, but he refused. He said he only got it for her as a present. Perhaps he thought this gesture would seal their relationship. But instead, this act actually sealed his fate. As it turned out, his new girl was not a teenage student. She was a 25-year-old undercover police officer involved in a drug sting operation. Local police had performed a drug sweep at 3 schools in Florida. They sent several undercover police officers to pose as high school teenagers. The undercover cops went to classes, became Facebook friends and even flirted with the other students. At the end of the operation, police did a big sweep and arrested 31 students, including the young man mentioned earlier. Most of the students were charged with selling a small amount of marijuana to the undercover cops. As for the young 18-year-old honor student, he now has a felony hanging over his head. His goal was to join the military, but that's no longer possible with a felony charge. While these undercover police tactics may yield results, they do not come without controversy. After all, they are essentially tricking young people into procuring small amounts of marijuana so they can charge them with felonies. And it's not just in Florida. In 2004, an 18-year-old male in Massachusetts made friends with someone he didn't know was an undercover cop. One day his new friend asked him if he had any weed. He then handed him a joint. The friend then offered to pay him $20, which he refused. But the friend insisted, so he took the money. By the end of the day, he wound up being among 19 people arrested in a major undercover narcotics operation in the area. And since the deal took place less than 1,000 feet from a school, it's also considered a drug-free zone. That meant it carried a mandatory minimum 2-year sentence. His lawyer argued that a government official induced the defendant to enter a danger zone that exposed him to an enhanced penalty. He added that this will impair the young man's future job prospects and eligibility for government benefits and educational grants. However, the prosecution argued that the defendant's own testimony hurt him. He admitted sharing pot with his friends, which indicates that he was predisposed to distributing marijuana. Thus, a 2007 Massachusetts appeals court upheld the marijuana distribution case against him. Their position was that drug dealers need not have knowledge of school zone boundaries in order to be charged and convicted. In other words, this all may seem unfair, but that's the law.